Hello, folks. Sorry it took me a while to get this stream going for anyone watching live, but to anyone watching during or after the fact, or as I like to sometimes say, perhaps in the past tense too, if you have some strange sort of time machine I would like you to tell me about. We are going to be today returning to the combo classroom and then back to indoors because it's pretty dark and chaotic out here. Very muddy. It's been raining like crazy. But today, I figured I had to share a new game that I came up with, which is not the type of game. I mean, okay, it's the type of game, but it's not the game that I've mentioned in previous live streams. In conjunction with a few things. One is that the next episode I'm putting out on the main combo class channel is about game theory. This episode is about a particular game. I've warned people for a while that I have enjoyed this game Magic the Gathering since I was a younger child, and that I didn't play it for like 15 years, and then about a year ago I looked back into the math of this game Magic the Gathering that I had loved as a child, and I found that it was worth multiple episodes. And so this covers at least a few of those multiple episodes, because this next episode on the main combo class channel is more than an hour long. It's probably going to be more than twice as long as any other mathematical episode on the channel. Probably about twice as long as the longest thing on the channel, which was the grade -1 finale / documentary. However, while I have been studying this game, I've also, of course, been playing around with games of my own. The reason I was studying this was to figure out what mistakes they had made, and if I did design any games of my own, what I would want to prevent putting in those. For example, cards that are too powerful. What makes a card too powerful? In a game I would make, it may have different rules and different setup, but there will be things that make a card too powerful, and perhaps studying traits like card draw or costs of cards or ability to cheat randomness and traits like that will be interesting to analyze. This next episode is basically the most powerful Magic cards of all time, but what they can teach us about game design as well. Now, today I did want to tell you about a game that I came up with myself, and like I said, it's not the one that I've been chatting about recently. I came up with another really simple game because I get so sidetracked on these big projects. For example, books. I have yet to publish any fiction to you folks because I am so perfectionist about the big scale books I'm trying to write. That doesn't mean there aren't many of them. It's just that I have been unable to feel confident in a state where I wanted to put one of them out yet. Now, with games, I have been cooking up a big-scale game while studying Magic and figuring I want to make a game that has many expansions, that has many different cards you could include in your deck, super complicated. And while I still want to design that, I also figured maybe while we're at it, we should design a simple-ish game based on a property that I was mentioning throughout streams and one recent episode of what I nicknamed Numberations. When you take a operation then a number, so you're like at a given number and then a given numberation maybe to double it, which could be called ×2, or could be to square it, which could be called to the power of 2, or could be to half it, cut it in half, divide by 2, or equivalently multiply by 1/2. Or we could have numberations that are additive, like +1, or +2, or -1, or -2, to whatever number we're at. Now, these were something I was studying as far as which combinations of these maximize, first of all, which combinations of these can describe any number if you had an infinite amount of any given one. And that turns out to describe different numeral bases, as I said in my episode about numberations. But also, I found that I was looking at these things close to this subject known as integer complexity, where you measure quantities of ones, where you're allowed to do parentheses, so it's a bit different, but ones and multiplication and addition combined in different ways that have different studies that are completely underrated in math, and I think is one of the other subjects I can imagine making an hour-long episode about this grade. Now, as far as that goes, I developed a game based on these numberations. I figured, why don't I cook these numberations into a little game that hopefully we could achieve a few goals. Now, it's not going to achieve all the same goals I've established that you'd want in a card game like Magic the Gathering, where expansion packs are always going to have new cards you want to come out that mix into the old thing. This is going to be a limited set of cards that could occasionally have expansions, or occasionally have variations. But the numberation game that I've invented, I would like to play and test right now. I have cut some paper into some card-sized sheets. I can draw, assuming I have a working marker here. I have one at least indoors. I hope I have one out here. Does this work? Oh my god, there's all these, like, leaves fall into here when the drawers open, and then they kind of rot. So there's kind of, like, rotten leaf all over this. Let's test if it works. Not really. Okay, when I need to take an intermission at some point in a little bit, I will grab a proper pen and we'll set up our cards. And the cards are going to be for a game that the reason I cut them out from scratch is partially because this was the easiest way to do it right now, to test out the game. But also because I wanted to show you folks that you can do this. Today's game is going to be one I'll give the full rules of. I'll explain how you could test this with your friends. And in fact, I could even get data from you folks if any of you care enough to test it and want to check whether you think there are too many or too few of a given card in a deck. Because you see, there are some common types of numberation card, like +1 or ×2, that I will certainly want to include many of in this game. I'll explain how the rules work in a minute. But there are other ones, such as square root of, or reverse the digit sum in its base 10 representation, or go to the triangular number of that number, or things that are a little more obscure that could be fun to include a few of in the deck. And so if people would like to test if any of these cards need more or less of them in the deck, you could test different variations. There are going to be 8 basic numberations. Then there can be other ones we'll call the specialized numberations, which will be ones that you could fit in if you want. I'll give suggestions about which specialized numberations. If for some reason I ever sell this as a game, which, trust me, I'll do as cheap as possible. This would be to get in classrooms and stuff. I care about my pride. I don't care about money. I'll find a way to survive. I'll eat worms if I need to. I'll find a way to survive, folks. But I care about my pride, so if I sell a game like this, I'll do it as cheap as possible. And then there would probably be, if I sell a game like this, the main deck, which just has the 8 main numberations, and then a side deck, which some players could choose to also shuffle in if they want, which would contain more complex numberations. And by complex, I don't mean complex numbers yet, but there could be a future variation for sure where you multiply things by something like 1 plus I. So, okay, my chair is greatly sinking into the mud. I know it looks like I'm just like getting lower throughout this, but the chair I'm in is sinking into the mud. So I need, if people don't believe me about this mud, to boot up the first computer stuff I'm going to show you folks, let me show you a tiny clip I took of the rain recently around the classroom, because this is what it has looked like when I've tried to go into the classroom recently. Give me a second to boot this up. I'm not the good tech guy. So everything and all of my things will prove that I am a lot better at creativity and intelligence of different sorts that are not technology related. Now, that is why someday I will hopefully have a team to help me with this, but I know I've said that for a long time, and I have a fun fact for you folks. You know, I might have a big opportunity coming up. I might have a budget coming up at some point. So, I don't want to talk any promises or anything right now, but there could be a bigger budget coming at some point in the future. And if I can ever have the right budget to have other people do my editing and tech work, ooh, you folks don't even know what I could achieve with my, if I had all my time just to write and perform, as opposed to, and direct, as opposed to, I'm not quick at tech stuff like this. You see how long it took me to set this up? So, now, oh, by the way, I put a new short out on the channel. I put out a new Patreon thing also, where I fish for a clock to anyone on Patreon. This was the clip I was going to show. This is what the yard looks like right now. So, this was like a couple days ago, maybe 1 to 3 days ago. I forget exactly. And basically, this is why it's so muddy right now. You see, after it rains, there's like a flood. This is me trying to walk to the combo classroom. I'm like, okay, we gotta cross through this, I guess. Okay. Well, okay, good thing we got a little shore. Okay, good thing we stepped to the opposite shore now we got. And finally, we are in our convo classroom. Now, the next episode has a lot of chaos that occurs in this classroom. I know it looks a little chaotic in here at the moment, but you'll see. I made an hour-long episode. You know, all my combo lords out there who are the true fans know that I'm not going to make an hour-long episode on my main channel without it having some sorts of chaos. And trust me, this one does have flames, does have floods, does have squirrels, does have cats, does have a lot of digital editing, does have a field trip to rare locations, does have a lot of good stuff. Because if I make an hour-long episode on my main channel, you folks better tune into that, whether or not you care about that the topic is going to be about the game Magic the Gathering. Now, I know some people think this is my main channel, but it's not. It just has more subscribers. Some people measure things funny. Measure things in pride, folks. My main channel is the channel that I try my hardest on, and that I try to make sure comes across almost like a TV show or something. So, this is not my main channel. I love all of the people who have found me through shorts. But remember, this channel is just, pardon my language, this channel is just me fucking around. This is not my main channel. So, make sure that you're tuned into combo class as well, to everyone who has found me on this channel and doesn't know that one yet, because that one has less subscribers, because it turns out that at least if you make shorts, the YouTube algorithm, I think, favors quantity over quality. But who cares what they favor? Maybe my bonus channel will have more subscribers than my main one. Whatever. YouTube favors what they want to favor. But I think this is, to a degree, my quantity channel, and the other is my quality channel. And that YouTube likes quantity. I don't know. What are you going to say? Nothing against YouTube. It is probably my favorite probably my second favorite website after Wikipedia. And, like, I'm a diehard YouTube fan. I will go to bat for war for, like, that YouTube has done wrong things for sure. They've done really bad things as a platform. They're not completely fair to any degree. But that out of all the platforms, they're one of the best. They're my favorite. So, anyway, that was the flood that has been occurring, which is why my chair will probably, now that I've redug it out of the mud, and now I've sat here, it'll probably like re-sink over the next minute or two while it just like, I can't have pointy chairs in the classroom. If the chairs have pointy legs, after the rain, they just go straight down. It's silly. It's like out of a cartoon. I need to show you some of the chairs out there. It looks surreal. They're like sunk at strange angles because someone sat down and was like, whoa, and then got off it. So the chairs are all like embedded into the ground at like the wrong angle, sort of. Now, okay, if I have my computer open, I have to show you the last clip. People have asked about my cats. I put this clip on the computer just to show the stream because they're really, really, really good boys. This is the new cat Sassafras, who I adopted not that long ago. I adopted him a year and a half ago. And he was a stray feral cat. So I first met him about 2 years ago. And he didn't have a home. I checked out everywhere he went and stuff. And he just wanted to copy my cats. I had Sage and Dandelion. Now he has a name, Sassafras. He loves that he has a name. He comes when his name is called. He loves having a name. But he didn't used to have a name because he didn't have a home. So I had my cats, Sage and Dandelion, and he wanted to be like them. He wanted to have a name. He wanted to have a home. He wanted to have a place where basically he might be related to them, my cats. We adopted from a nearby humane society. He came from this weird abandoned house across the street that a lot of feral cats moved into and had babies in until they renovated it. So they're renovating this house across the street right now. But there were years where it was abandoned. And cats would just have kittens in there. And it would be like fighting for scraps and stuff. So Sassafras would fight for scraps. I'm sure this boy has eaten like birds and rats and stuff for food. But he has never bit or scratched me once. Because all he wanted was a home. And he just wanted to have the life that Sage and Dandelion had. My original cats. And, well, not original, but current original. And I say not original because there's a previous lore where I had a pair of cats named Twitherby and Jitterug in grade 0, which is unknown chronology. By unknown, I mean I can't show you all of it yet. And then there's also a cat I had as a young child. Which was, I guess we had actually go back, if we're going backwards, if grade -2 goes back to -1, then 0, I guess it makes sense that if we go back to the last cat, after grade 0 being like the cats I had like 10 years ago, grade 1 was the cat. If we go the other direction, we get to grade 1. And when I was in first grade was probably when I had the childhood cat. So then we're back in the typical grades. Sometimes you go around the bend, modular arithmetic. Now, anyway, I just had to show you folks this clip of look at Sassafras hanging out on the chair in the house. And there's Dandelion, his fluffy possible brother. And there's Sage Dandelion's brother. And these boys are now all friends. And there's 3 friends who live in the house who are little black cats who are so cute and nice and... Okay, Sassafras is too new for me to give him this credit. But I'm not even kidding. When I was going through some dark things, Sage and Dandelion probably saved my life. So you can credit combo class to Sage and Dandelion. Now, looking at the Numberation game, I do need to grab a pen because none of the pens in this drawer worked. So I'm going to need to grab a pen indoors real quick. And you know the combo class policy. I know I seem silly around fire. I know it's probably dumb for me to even have candles here. The last 2 times I've had candles in the combo classroom, I've burnt myself. Why do you think I have a giant hole in the lab coat right here? This is from a candle from a stream. Okay, so I shouldn't even have candles here anyway, but we definitely have to blow them out when I go inside because that's a policy. I have certain policies in the combo classroom. Like, obviously, if you come in the combo classroom, some of the policies are like, if you rob me or if you lie to me, you're probably going to regret it. That's a policy. I'm kind of kidding. Not really, though. And other policies are if you actually try and, like, hurt my family or something, you are really going to regret it. And the main policies I was referencing are, like, that if I have a camera person here and we're doing a fire-related thing, no matter how small the fire is, that we say, if the fire is lit, one of us is watching it. So if the fire is lit in the combo classroom, there's a human who, I'm sorry I can't count you folks. You're humans, but you can't prevent a fire if you see one here. And so a human who is able to, stop a fire if it spreads, who is watching the fire at any given point. So given that I am currently the only one running my streams, we are going to have to blow out the flames for a second. I'll turn up the max brightness while we do that. And I'm going to grab some pens, and then we can actually write down our Numberations game. Okay, I'll be back soon. You folks watch the clocks and see if for some reason we get like a nighttime possum or something. Leave your comment about what bonus numberation you think would be cool to be included. A numberation is typically a operation than a number, but it could theoretically be anything that takes a number and spits out a new number from it. God, I almost slip in that mud every single time I come back here. I'm not kidding. That mud is crazy. Okay. So, folks, I'm back. We're going to design some numberation cards real quick. Now, the reason we're designing these is for a card game. So, let's call this... Let's relight our candles real quick. There's not much candle left, but let's relight whatever we have left of these candles. And call this the beginning of... where I'll timestamp the part of the stream where we're officially designing the cards. And we're going to note that in this game, I'm going to need things that are numberations. I'll explain the rules fully in a second, because we're going to write down all the rules. I have all the rules in an unofficially written way as notes on the side here, and that I invented, and then we will write them in slightly more official language for any of you to copy if you want. Oh, this looks kind of cool. Look at these 3 arcs. Oh, those are circular. That's pretty neat. Oh, that's crazy. I like that. Now, we're going to make some numberation... Oh, that one's blinking on me. We're going to make some numberation cards. Now, I'll explain exactly what we're doing with the numberation cards in a minute. But a numberation, like I said, edits a number into a new number. And so the ones we're going to begin with, just to explain the game, are 8 basic numerations. We will also design a few custom special numerations that we'll throw in to show what they do. But the basics, let's make a few of each. And one is going to be n+1. Now, what that means is we take whatever given number we're at and we add 1 to it. So, let's make like 4 copies of n+1. Now, a normal deck would be maybe twice this size or something about. But we're going to do about 4 copies of n+1 and about 2 copies of n+2. And these are going to mean that you would add 2 to whatever number you are currently at. Now, by add to what number you're at, of course, I need to explain the rules momentarily. But let's just make our 8 basic numerations first. So we're going to have 4 +1s and 4 +2s. We're additionally going to have 4 -1s and 4 -2s. So that's half of our basics once I get these written. So we're going to have 4 -1s. And I just cut these out of paper. Remember, folks, if any of you want to test this game to give me your own knowledge of what ratios of cards you think would be best to include, you can print them yourself somehow. You could buy like magic card sleeves and just put these in them, print these out of card stock or something. You could cut them a lot better than I did. I did it really quick before the stream. But also, if anyone actually wants, I could someday sell this for as cheap as possible. But I'm not trying to do that to make a profit. Money is annoying and dumb. I want to make good videos and books and music and games and philosophies. So there's my 4 n-1s. These subtract 1 from the number I'm at. And I'm also going to make 2 n-2s. Now, we have to complement addition with multiplication. So we are going to make a very similar set that is multiplicative. What do I mean by that? I mean that we are going to have 4 that let me multiply by the smallest amount that grows that, which would be 2n. I double the number. So we're going to have 4 cards that are listed 2n here. Note that if you make a custom deck, you might want to make double this size because it's a shared deck. You play with an opponent with a shared deck in the current version. However, I do like the idea of being able to build custom decks. So if you build a custom deck, we'll say that you're allowed to use any amount of these basic ones in your deck, and that you are allowed to use only up to 4, I guess, of the specialty ones we'll put later. Here's another basic, though, is we need the reverse. We put n plus 2 got n minus 2. So 2n needs n over 2. Now, at first, when I was thinking, if there's a range of numbers where you're only allowed to play these if they... in the current game, you're only going to be allowed to play these on a certain thing if it turns it into another whole number in the range you're in. Or into another number in the range you're in, but the range currently is whole numbers between 1 and 100. Now, because of that, I thought maybe dividing by 2 is going to be like worse than doubling because you can't do it as often. But I realized they're pretty symmetrical in that there are just as many numbers between 1 and 100 that you are allowed to double and get another result from 1 to 100, and numbers that are a number where if you take half of them, you get a whole number result from 1 to 100 within that range. So, for example, these would be all the even numbers you could apply this to, and these would be all the numbers between 1 and 50. Now, similarly, we get a little bit of symmetry when I'm going to put a slightly smaller amount of 3n's. We're just going to put 2 of each of those that triple a number, and 3 over n's that third a number. No, n over 3. Shoot. Okay, we're just going to crumble this one up. N over 3's. Okay, so those are our basics, and this is about half the size you'd typically use as a deck, but I just wanted to test a few things out with it and explain the rules. So let's design a few specialty cards, which, for example, we'll make just one copy of one that says n squared, and the way it works is I'm only going to be able to apply this if it's within the range. And we are going to say that our starting range is whole numbers from 1 to 100 for the beginner game. And so I'm only going to be able to apply this to a number from 1 to 10. Now, similarly, if I say square root of n, at first you might think that sounds kind of worse. There's not as many numbers that could apply to that would give me a whole number out of that. However, it's the same amount because there are 10 numbers that squared lead to a number that can be square rooted to lead to one of those within the range. Another one that I like is we're going to call this digit reverse, base 10. Now, what this means is you take the base 10 representation, and let's note, just to be clear on this, number needs to be multi-digit and not end in 0. By saying number needs to be multi-digit and not end in 0, just as sort of a clarification, I'm clarifying that I'm not allowing 30 to flip to 03 and then be 3. But you could let 31 flip to 13. So it's a digit reverse in base 10 in some way, where you take the number, you look at its base 10 representation, and you can play this on that if it's a multi-digit number that doesn't end in a 0. And then you're allowed to reverse the digits, look at what that would represent in the base 10 representation, and go to that number instead. Now, I would love to put ones that are a little trickier, like convert number to how these digits would look in base 6 if these digits existed in base 6. Those might throw a few people off, so we'll chill on those for a second. But let's make one called triangularize. Well, we can't make triangularize because I want to make these symmetrical a bit. And I made digit reverse is symmetrical in its own way. Squaring something and square rooting them are symmetrical. Adding, subtracting are. Multiplying, dividing are. In the way this game is going to work. And so I don't want to make triangularize unless it has its own addendum or another card that is like untriangularize. Go to which number this was the triangular number of. And that's kind of confusing to put in our beginner set. For another bonus one we'll put in, let's say round to nearest multiple of 5. You could have round to the nearest, which is a modular thing when we look at our modular arithmetic, but it can also be just described this way. Round to nearest multiple of 5. And what that could do is, in some cases, add 1, add 2, subtract 1, or subtract 2. But you don't really get to pick out of which of the +1, +2, -1, -2s. So is this card better or worse than one of those? Because you can't pick, but in the right circumstance, you could do either. Well, let me explain how the rules work of this game. Essentially, you have each player shares the deck to begin. You could play with individual decks if you'd like. And as a reminder for anyone tuning in right now, this is not the main game I've been developing, but I decided we're going to go simpler for a second, and we're going to make the type of game that people can understand, print their own, or buy a cheap set of maybe, and maybe it could be played in classrooms. Maybe you could use a parent to teach your kids math. Maybe you use just the beginning numberations and skip the squareds and stuff. Now, here's how this works. There are different zones in any game. The zones currently here are a deck that's shared, a hand that each player has, which is actually face up. Now that sounds different than a typical game perhaps, but trust me, we need our hands to be face up in this game. It makes sense. Now, you got a face up hand, then you got a shared 2 zones. They are 2 different piles that have cards stacked on top of each of them, starting from no cards on either, but which can be marked in a certain way. Now, there are 3 typical variations I would like to propose to begin with, because there are going to be points where these stacks reset to their original value, where the cards on them, which are numberations that edit the original value, are wiped clean, and they're back to the beginning. So we're going to need to look at, let me see how to explain this best. With the 2 piles, the 3 variations that I propose, I'll say one is the main. We're going to start with, if anyone tests this right now, go from this. You always have your left pile, or you could call it your western pile or whatever, and your right pile or your eastern pile or whatever. The reason I'm calling them western and eastern is because players face a table from opposite directions, so they're going to have different perceptions of left and right. So if you did want to declare it's on this side of the table, it almost makes more sense to declare it like a northeast, southwest sort of direction. Now, you have what we'll call the left pile and right pile, but note that, that would be not the best term when players are facing each other on the opposite sides of the table. On the left pile, we'll say you start from 1, and on the right pile, we'll say you start from 30. That is the simplest variation. However, I think a fun other set of variations would be you roll 2 dice. And I think you would roll 2 6-sided dice. You could even choose a variation where you roll other sides of dice amounts. And one of them begins that pile from 0 plus that number. So say I roll a 5, that pile begins at a 5. The other die, if that one rolls, say, a 4, then it subtracts that from 100. Because the minimum roll is a 1, which would leave that at a 99. Currently, I said 100 was the maximum of our range, But perhaps we should have... I was also considering 99 as the maximum of the range of what numbers are allowed, like a whole number between 1 and 99. In fact, I think, amend or addend my original thing and say that we'll go from 1 to 99 for now, and we'll say that allows the variation easier where you do 100 minus a certain die roll as the larger one of the two, and 0 plus the other as the smaller of the two. That's only a second variation because one would cause that to occur as the eternal reset point for the whole game, that this pile starts at that and this pile starts at that if we ever reset. The other would be that we re-roll the dice each time we get where there is a reset, which will be explained in a moment. If we ever reset, that we would re-roll the dice to redetermine a starting pile number before any new numberations are played. Now, let's assume that we're playing the version that one pile just starts at 1 and one pile just starts at 30, and we're allowed to go to 99 as the max. You need a whole number between 1 and 99 if you edit any of these piles. Now, what is the point of this game? Well, what is the point of any game is a good philosophical question, but what is the goal of how do you win this game? Well, essentially, at any point during your turn, you will have a certain amount of cards in your hand, face up to your opponent. And at the end of your turn, you will get to draw more cards. But during your turn, you just have a given amount, and you will be able to play a certain amount of those. And I have made a rule that does help strategy, I believe, that says that you must play at least one card per turn if able. You are not able to play a card on something that does not leave a new number in the range. So if I have the number 7, I cannot play n over 2 on it, because that would leave 3.5, which is not a whole number between 1 and 99. Similarly, if I have the number 60, I could not play 2n on it, because that would leave 120, which is also not a whole number between 1 and 99. So I can, if possible, you must play a card from your hand. And then you may play additional cards during your turn if you'd like. You may play as many cards as you want, as long as you've played one if possible. The reason you must play one if possible is that you end up drawing 2 cards essentially per turn. In between turns, each player draws a card. And we'll say if you don't happen to have an even amount of cards in the deck because you lost one or whatever, we'll say the player who just did the turn draws first, then they deal a card to the other player. They're both face up. So you could say that each player takes a card off the top of the deck in between turns, or you could equivalently say that at the end of each turn, each player draws a card, then deals one to their opponent. Now, the way that you get points and actually win this game is that during your turn, if you can use your numberations to cause the 2 piles to be the same number, you get every card in each pile. And each card is just going to be 1 point at the moment. So there will be multiple rounds within a particular match where in a given deck, you will probably have this player gets this player gets these ones, and a little bit of back and forth. So you will have to maximize how many cards you get, as well as whether or not you are the one who makes them equal. Now, that's literally the whole rules, and I think it will be a good game. I mean, there's like clarifying rules I will have to maybe say in a minute. I'll check my notes to make sure there's nothing that will cause any glitches in the rule set if anyone tests this on their own. But that's essentially the whole rules. And I believe it will actually be a quite interesting game to have 2 numbers that you start 2 different piles at. and players have numberations in their hand, and they're trying to make the two piles equal. It's a different idea than any of the games I've proposed in the past. It is based on the same numberation concept that I nicknamed in the past, but it is a very different game structure than one I would typically do. If anything, it's simpler. If anything, it's almost like math meets like Uno. You know the game Uno, where there's like only like 10 different cards in the deck, and you like play them and stuff with each other, and you have a fixed deck that you, I think, share. I haven't played it in a while. That one it's almost like math meets that if we get it right, because we only need a fixed amount of cards in the deck. We put some specialty ones in here. We put round to nearest 5, we put squared, we put square root, and we put digit reversal. But we have 2 to 4 copies of the other ones, apart from one I dropped. And is this a bad idea to use the candle to look for it? No, there it is. Okay, I put out one of the candles by accident, but... Don't worry, to anyone who saw that the last combo class episode was all about whether or not the number 666 is cursed. And if you think I'm still cursed, I'm definitely not cursed. No, I'm kidding with you folks. I'm probably not cursed. Ow, I can't. So these candles are getting so low. I just there's barely any candle left to light in there. So it's okay because we got to move indoors soon anyway. We can't be outdoors hyper late being really loud. So we're going to go in my room in a bit. It is a nighttime stream. And we're going to continue the numberation experiment there. So the way that the game works for those who want to tune in before I bring these cards in is to remember that players are going to share a deck that would normally be about twice this size, maybe 3 times this size. And players will, between turns, each draw a card, starting with the player whose turn was last, if you happen to have an odd number of cards. Meaning that at the end of your turn, you deal a card to yourself and then your opponent. And that during your turn, if possible, you play a numberation on one of 2 piles that start from different numbers. And if you at any point during your turn, you can play more than one if you'd like. You can play multiple numerations if you want, but you must play at least one if there's a valid one to play in your hand. Now, the hands are face up so that it's very clear. I think the face-upness makes it less like Magic the Gathering, but more like chess, which I study various games, and I genuinely think that the face-up hands makes it more of a studyable game like chess or Go or checkers or something. Now, or Connect 4, which I made an episode about. Make sure you've seen that. Now, these numerations we're going to bring inside in a second and test a little game between 2 players and how this could work. Essentially, we'll just go through the deck and see if either player is even able to get one win off this mini deck. Normally, you'll have a larger sized shared deck, and that will result in a few back and forth wins. There could be back and forth wins. I have not tested this game yet, which is part of today's stream. So we're going to be doing our numberation things. I'm going to add one more custom one. I know it's like a random amount of them, but looking at my notes right here, another fun one is one called Clone. And this one will copy the numberation below it. So I'm going to nickname it Clone, and I'm going to say copy numberation below. So it basically like doubles whatever is below it. Now, these are some custom ones we had where like clone, round to nearest 5, square, square root, and digit reversal in base 10. And those I just made 1 copy of. I have made 2 copies of the larger of each numberation in terms of multiplicatively. The larger is 3, the smaller is 2 in terms of multiplication or division. I've made, that's larger, smaller. Additively, 1 is the smaller and 2 is the bigger. And I have made 4 copies of each of those smallers, 2 copies of each of those biggers, and 1 copy of each of those specials. And that is the custom deck we have right here. If anyone wants to test it themselves, they could double or triple this deck, play it with a friend, and let me know in a comment whether they think you'd want to add or subtract any amount, whether we have too many or too few of a given type of card. Or if there's any rules glitches you for some reason notice. I will try and clarify in a minute. I'll look back through my notes whether there's any other bonus rules I need to mention. Games need a very precise rule set if they want to be... okay, so I'm making this hour-long episode about Magic the Gathering. They're actually really good. I'm making an episode about their flaws of throughout history, the cards they've made too overpowered. But they have genuinely done a good job at having a clear rule set that stays true throughout time. That they edit, they have to change it a bunch, but they keep it true over time is the goal, and they do a pretty good job. They do a better job than games like Yu-Gi-Oh! For real. Like, games like Yu-Gi-Oh! Do not have a clear rule set. There are ambiguous card states in tournaments. That it's like, okay, the judge thinks it should do this, I guess. In Magic, there's almost perfect. And by almost perfect over a 30-year history, I mean, there is an hour worth of flaws to talk about. Now, big flaws. Cards that have had to be banned in every single tournament. And to those who think that, to those who know Magic the Gathering, and you think I'm just going to talk about the classic Power 9, these 9 really old cards that are really powerful. No, those cards are notorious because they're expensive. Only 2 of the Power 9 are on my most powerful end list. All the Power 9 get mentioned, of course, but only 2 of them are actually among the greatest cards of all time if you had to pick like 5 or 10 cards. So, remember, if you already know Magic, it's not just about the expensive ones. Okay, let's bring these cards inside. I need to do a little transition. Let me check to make sure that it's a good time to hop back into my room real quick, grab some water, and so on. So we are going to have to do another 1 second intermission. And by 1 second, I mean about 3 minutes. So I'll be back soon to transport the computer into my room. And we'll be restarted in 3 or 4 minutes in my room. And until then, leave your comment about what your thoughts or opinions on these numberation cards are. And what you think will happen if I play this game between 2 players, if they'll be able to kind of gridlock each other into a tie of not hitting any of the numbers properly, or if players will be able to, either based on luck or strategy, make these 2 piles equal in amounts that give themselves more cards than the opponent. I'll be back soon. Alright, folks, I'm moving us over to the room real quick. I always almost slip on that mud. That is crazy mud out there. Now, I'm going to quickly send us over here where I'm just going to write Numberations game and send us over there. Because I don't want to, leak any of my personal info or anything. So we're just going to say Numberations game. And we're going to go there for a second. Wait. How do I make this go big? Gosh. Okay. Come on. Numberations game. Alright. We'll be back in my room shortly. I'm going to bring the Numberations cards. And we're going to see what would happen if two players were to try and play this demo version of the game against each other. Now, on the way back, I better not slip on the mud if I'm holding my laptop. This mud is treacherous. Okay, slow and steady, no mud slippage. Okay, dropping Numberations. Can't drop the clone. Almost dropped the clone. Brief little shortcut to show that. Do you remember I showed a clip of my cats earlier in the stream? Okay, not a shortcut, a long cut. Remember I showed a clip of my cats earlier in the stream? Well, Sassafras left his chair, the stray boy. But Dandelion and Sage are still here. Oh, Sage just jumped over there. What are you doing, Sage? Do you want to go out now that you're ready? That's my Sage. That's Sage. Sage is the most angel. I can't explain. You'll see Sage in action someday. But for now, you get Dandelion. And Dandelion is the fluffy boy that all of you probably know a little better. Because he's the fluffiest. And he likes making cat meows. And he's so soft. So there's our little Dandelion moment for the stream. Then we're going to go to my room to do some Numberations. But we have to get a little Dandelion action first. That's my Dandelion. They even like, these cats, when you scruff a cat by the back of their neck, where you grab this right spot on the back of their neck, you have to do it from just the right spot. They like it, and it makes them feel like you're their mother. Even Sassafras, the stray, likes it when you give them a little scruff. But you have to do it gently, and they think you're like their mom. Alright, that's my little Dandelion. That's a good boy. Okay, so we're gonna go actually to my room now, but I have to pick up all the Numberations that I dropped while I was petting the cats. Okay, so, Dandelion, do you want to come to the room? Dandelion, you can come if you want. Hey. Okay. Alright, they're being silly. They might come in a minute. Now, my family had to fix our stove which is why I used a broken stove in an absolutely insane shot in my recent egg episode. And when we fixed the new stove, I was filming on it, and I dropped a Rubik's Cube and a calculator behind it. And so, finally I got them back. We had a handy person in the house who was fixing something around the stove. And I really awkwardly asked them, like, hey, by the way, this is a really weird question, but is there a Rubik's Cube behind that stove? Because I felt like I might have dropped a Rubik's Cube behind there in one of my videos. And they were like, there's a Rubik's Cube and a calculator. And so I got my Rubik's Cube back. And I got my calculator, which is the calculator that got me the most views out of anything, if you count shorts. Divide by 0 on this calculator is like my most viewed video on 2 different apps. So, alright. Now, thank you to everybody who's joined me right here. What we're going to look at for a moment is our numberations on some sort of platform. I'm trying to think about how I can set these up best. So we're kind of just by my window right here in my room. And I'll make a little platform for our numberations to live on. So we're going to have to build that from like some books. What's the widest book I got? It's probably a comic book. So, yeah, here we go. So the widest book I got is probably a Calvin and Hobbes comic book from back in the day. So we'll put that right there. You know, the comics are a work of art, and this is one of the better comic strip form of comics of all time, Calvin and Hobbes. It's actually kind of beautiful, also pretty funny. So we'll put Weirdos from Another Planet there, but we will flip it just so it's a little more abstract looking. Now, let's say 2 players are playing our numeration game. How does our game work? Well, we said that players are going to have 2 piles. And let's say that these piles for this version are going to start from 1 and 30. So we're just going to know that on this side, whatever I stack right here is editing the number 1. And whatever I stack right here is editing the number 30. Now over here on like the edges, I'm going to put players' hands, because players will have hands that are face up. Now, player 1's turn, they cannot make any valid moves. They don't have anything in their hands to make any valid moves. So each player draws a card at the end of each turn. Now, player 2's turn, I suppose they must go. They must play this 3N they drew. So that's going to triple one of them. And they actually have a choice here, because the range of numbers that we're allowed to hit is a whole number between 1 and 99. So from 30, I could create the 30 to a 90, or I could create the 1 into a 3. One of these inches me closer to success, but also inches my opponent closer to success, because the goal is to make the 2 numbers equal. One of them inches us each further from success. And at this point, it would be pretty hard to know which is better. But if an opponent had a pretty large hand, it could be clear whether it's better to avoid either player winning at the moment, or to try and creep toward whichever player is in the lead getting some points. So let's say that for now we edit the 1. So that is now a 3. Now each player draws a card. So now player 1 has an n plus 1 and one of these rarer ones, which is an n squared. So they can either make 30 to 31, and then they wouldn't be able to square that if they wanted. They can't square the 30 in any case, whether or not they use that first. But they could make 30 to 31 if they wanted. They could also square 3, which is the current amount here, because we tripled the 1, to 9. We could use both and make it 9 and then 10. Or I could add 1 first. Like if I went like that and then that, that would result in 16. Because I added 1 to tripling it and then squared it. Now, this player must make a valid move if possible. So let's say that they just make the 30 to a 31. Let's say that we've edited both piles now. So essentially now this is this player's hand back here. This is this player's hand. And these are the shared piles. And we'll put like the face down deck in the middle, even though I can kind of see what they're going to draw next. We'll just pretend the deck's there. Okay, so I made mine on plain paper. If you make your own on a printer, you might want to use construction paper or use a thinner marker or something. Otherwise, you know, we're testing it as if we are both players. But if you're playing against another person, you probably don't want your things to be readable through the back. So maybe use construction paper. Or tell me that you'd buy the game for $20 and I'll find a way to sell it. Now, if this player does that and doesn't do anything else, then they each draw a card and it goes to the next player's turn. So they draw this and deal this to the next player. Oh, these are both some of the weirder ones. So this is square root of n. They have n square. Okay, okay. I feel like I didn't shuffle this in any way. All of my weird ones are in a row, but that's okay. It'll give us an idea of some of these strange traits that could occur. This is square root of n, which we can only play on a square number to hit a result, which is a whole number. And this is n squared, which we can only play on a number from 1 to 10. That leaves 10 possibilities these could each target. So they might not even have a valid turn sometimes and might skip their turn. Now, this one is digit reverse. This is even weirder. This is digit reverse in base 10. And I made a note that you cannot have the number end in a 0, and it does need multiple digits. So you cannot turn a 30 into a 3. You could turn a 31 into a 13. You reverse the digits in base 10 and go to that number, essentially. Now, I suppose this player has to go now, right? Or, wait, which player had to go right now? They played... Yeah, this player has to go right now. So, they could turn the 31 to a 13. And this player couldn't do too much. So, I mean, if they use that one. Or they could turn the 31 back to a 30. They can also turn the 3 to a 2. And they can't play that on that. So, let's say that they digit reverse. Let's say they turn that to a 13. Now, each player is going to draw a card. They draw first and then deal 1 to the opponent. They got an n plus 1. They got an n over 3. So, this player is at the numbers 13 and 3. Can they get somehow... Wait, I don't even know if they can play one. Oh, yeah. Their only option is to either n over 3 the 3 to 1 or n squared the 3 to 9. They can't do anything with the 13. Can't square root it, can't square it and be in the 1 to 99 range, and can't third it. So they have to go on this pile. But they can choose which of these. Now, they have to think, what do I want to do that won't let my opponent do something within a single move? if I n squared the 3 to a 9, then it's 9 and 13. They could almost get there in one more, but not quite. Safe enough. But let's be safer and say they n over 3 it back to 1. So now we're at a 1 and a 13 as the two piles. So now they each draw a card. Oh, they have two of the same card now. They have two n plus ones and an n minus one. So they're at a 1 and a 13. They do have to do a valid move if possible. They probably don't want to play multiple. Now, the reason why I'm hoping that the deck is big enough and you can hit cards often enough that you get multiple within a deck and then tally the amount of cards you got is that I think it'll be strategic to not encourage people to just play all their cards at once. Because if you play them all on a pile and your opponent gets it, they have gained more points. So let's say they just minus 1. They go to 12. Maybe that was a dumb move. We'll see what turns out. They each draw a card. I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have gone 112 because I feel like 112 gives this person a chance of doing something weird. Because, like, they could now do, like, +2 or +2 divided by 2, this, that. Can they do something weird there with 1 and 12? Well, they could divide 12 to 6. And then we could make it 8, but that can't. They could go to 64, and then, yeah. They can't make them equal in this case. So it didn't work out perfectly. Maybe you could have calculated that. In this case, let's say they just n over 2 it and it's at 6. So it's 1 and 6. Then they each draw one. Now that was a pretty dumb move. I'm kind of making dumber moves right now to show an example of someone winning in a minute. So we were at 6 and 1 because this started at 1. And now here's an important thing about the game. You don't, I would try and provide like a little sheet of numbers and little beads or something where you like put the bead on whatever number they're each on so you can track where you're at. But if you forget for any reason, you should be able to just look at the pile. This one started at 1. It went triple, divide by 3. This one started at 30. It went plus, and then if you follow the pile, we find it's at 13. Now, they're not like PEMDAS order. They are one at a time, to note. So, here, let's say we're at 1 and 6, which I think we actually got to 6, because we went down from 13 to 12, then 6, yeah. That was a bad move on purpose, kind of, because I wanted to show a player scooping something. Because here we can divide by 3 to 2. And we can minus 1 to 1. And the two piles are equal now. They both say 1. Now, it won't always be 1 as the number that both piles equal. Sometimes it'll be the upper number. Sometimes it'll be a different number in between. In fact, I think most often it'll be a number that was neither pile's starting number that they equalize on. Now, in this case, the player who equalized them gets all these as points. So they get that many points, essentially. And then you continue playing. I believe at that point, I would say the turn ends, that once it refills and you say we're now at 1 and 30 again, or you roll dice to determine where you're at. For example, rolling one die to be 0 plus dice roll for its starting point, and one to be 100 minus dice roll for its starting point. whether you do that, for now, my rule is going to be, if you get to scoop a pile, turn moves on. That's the end of your turn. So this player's turn would be now. They each draw one new one. This player gets around to the nearest multiple of 5. This player gets n-1. Now, they have 1 in 30. They could maybe even make it with all this stuff because they're starting to get a lot of stuff. They could go 2, 4, 16, but not quite enough to get us to 30. So they would still probably want to play 1 and collect more in their hand. So, essentially, these are the rules of the game I'll describe to anyone who, for some reason, wants to print their own in the meantime. Also, leave a comment if you'd buy this for $20 because although I'm not in this to make money, I would love to have people play this. And I could probably print them for $20, counting like shipping fees. So we'll see. Now, anyway, the rules are not currently written down too officially. But you know what? Screw it. I'll show to the stream my unofficial rules for now. This is, I'm just going to copy paste this over. This is out of, okay. Folks, I gotta tell you something crazy about, I get obsessed about random projects. This one, like, little game. So, let's see how many words it is. I'm going to word counter. This is a random site that will count how many words I have in a document. And it's 72,000 words in this document. That is a short novel. So, this is why I need editors to help me condense my thoughts into clear things, because I obviously have many thoughts, more than I'm able to put out myself. So I'm going to copy paste this last little section out of those 72,000 words, and I'm going to put that over here, and this is like a simple version of the rules. Rules for now. Simplest starting variation that will still have lots of strategy. Players begin with 0 cards in their hand, and at the end of each turn they draw 1 card each. To make it simple on the table, the player whose turn it was whose turn it just was, can deal a card to first themselves and then to their opponent. I wrote this recently, so I might edit it. Apart from each player's hand, which is fully face-up, and the shared deck, and each player's zone for cards they have collected, there are 2 ordered piles that each represent a number. Now, okay, I know some grammar freaks are going to be really mad that I don't capitalize the start of these sentences. Sorry, folks, I write books, I know how to capitalize stuff. I know the official, ways of doing commas and parentheses and capitalizations and stuff. However, the point is to be understood. And these notes are normally just for myself. And so if the point is to be understood by myself, sometimes the point is to type as fast as my brain can think. So when I want to type as fast as my brain can think, the grammar is not always perfect, and I have decided decisively that on many of my notes, I let myself not capitalize the first letter of anything so that I can type faster. So, to anyone mad about the, grammatization here, know that this is how I type things very fast and why I wrote 72,000 words about this very recently. So, apart from each player's hand, which is fully face up, and the shared deck and each player's zone for cards they've collected, there are 2 ordered piles that each represent a number. They begin with a dice roll each. So, the version I told you, I actually have as a variation here. You could start with a number such as 1 to 30. I think that it would be fun to test different versions. So in the official rules here I have, they begin with a dice roll each, where one color of 6-sided die makes that pile, meaning like the western or eastern die or whatever. It doesn't matter which color goes on which side as long as you distinguish them. Start at 0 plus n for that dice roll n. And the other 6-sided die makes that pile start at 100 minus n for its own n. Note that n is not a singular variable here. It means whatever given number we're describing. Players can play cards from their hand one at a time on their own turn on either of those piles, only if it edits the number there to be a whole number in the range 1 through 99. Each turn, a player must play at least one card if possible. If they have no valid moves, they just move to the draw phase. During a player's turn, if the 2 piles represent the same number as each other, that player collects both of the piles. Their turn ends. These are notes to myself in italics. I said double check if that rule makes sense, because I collected these rules after a lot of mathematical thinking. So there are certain mathematical investigations I have to determine of what would maximize strategy in comparison to other traits, such as complexity. So I said double check to myself. That's just to myself. For now, assume it's true that your turn ends if you collect piles. Players draw cards, and the dice are re-rolled for new piles. Now, we'll see variations at the bottom where you don't use dice at all. When the deck is empty and both players must skip... See, this one is a kind of long note to myself. Maybe I should not put my personal notes to myself in the streams. Maybe this is a bad idea. Okay. When the deck is empty and both players must skip a turn in a row, neither can move or both are fully out of cards, the player who has collected the most total cards wins. Now this is the note to myself. Or maybe you can force the game to end and points to be tallied early if both players can't move in a row, whether or not the deck is empty. Although be careful about how that would affect opening turns. So here it's like, when I say be careful, it doesn't mean be careful as a player. I'm saying be careful to myself about designing the rules, because I try and make airtight games. To prevent memorization from being crucial, players could choose to tally points another way and reshuffle the collected cards into the deck each time. What I mean by that is that if you knew exactly what cards made up a starter deck that you shared, then by the end of the deck, whoever was keeping better track of them would know the remaining card is the one that says N over 2 or something. So perhaps you'd tally the points whenever something is scooped, reshuffle the deck, so memorization was less important. Now here I say for some simple variations, because boy do I have some complicated variations. You want to know my complicated variations? We have a lot of complicated variations. These are the 72,000 notes, maybe 72,000 words. Whoever can try and freeze frame this, feel free. I don't care. Try and freeze frame this. Just credit me. Whatever. These are 72,000 words like we just showed. No, go back. Go back down. This, but this, no. This is not what we were talking about. Number hills. No, these are These are radically different variations. Anyway, this, as I was showing, is some current notes about it. And for the simplest variations, if you don't want to use dice or don't have them, you can pre-select a number for each pile to permanently reset to during that game. Or can also play where they roll the dice once and keep that as the reset target numbers for the whole game. Like you roll dice, but those are what the piles are for the whole game. For now, I was saying you re-roll the dice whenever it resets. But you could also have them be the same reset point each time. Players could also agree to play multiple rounds, shuffling the deck in between where points are tallied and added between rounds. So, that right there is the very simplest version of what we could make for Numberation game rules. And I want more people to try and test it with me sometime. So, here's what I recommend. If you want to try and test this game ever, print your own cards out of cardboard or something, whatever. Doesn't matter. No one's cheating if you're just playing like 5 games and figuring it out. Or maybe you'll get really into it and then you'll print a better version. Or maybe enough people want to buy one that I can sell it for as cheap as possible. But in any case, if you can test it and print it on your own, do it. And I recommend to start, we're going to say no weird cards such as clones, round to nearest 5s, no even squares or square roots. Use the 8 basic numerations to start. The 8 basic numerations are +1 + 2, -1 - 2, times 2 times 3, divided by 2 divided by 3. Those are the 8 basic numerations. So use those and maybe skew more so toward the smallers. So maybe have, for example, in a deck, like 12 copies of +1 -1 times 2 divided by 2. And then like 6 copies of +2 - 2 times 3 divided by 3. However, test maybe if you think that having the same amount of copies works, because who knows, maybe the same amount of copies does work. That would be even neater if it somehow works to have the same amount of each thing. So, I would love my folks to help me test my Numberation games. This, of course, is far from the furthest game that I hope to develop. But I decided to start with a simple one. And I think this could almost be a good game to use in classrooms or homeschooling or things like that, where you're trying to teach a younger person, especially with just the 8 basic numerations. I think this could click a certain sensibility for math in a certain way. So perhaps we can get this into some classrooms, who knows. I just want to play it because I like games, and designing them is fun, as well as, you know, the other portions of it and such. And somebody says that it seems pretty complete, just the amount of getting the card amounts right. And that is true, that thank you, the rule set I think is relatively airtight for now. And that it's mostly card amounts if we're using the 8 basic numerations. And then the question of, if I print this, if I auto-include the slightly weirder ones like square, square root, rounding, triangularizing maybe, like turning to a triangular number, maybe Collatzian things where it's like if, even, or odd to do different things. Things like that, whether I print those in the main set or print those in a bonus set or something. Or perhaps a mix would be to print a set that comes with a main deck and then has like a little bonus pack that you could optionally shuffle in. Now, we got a lot of cursts in one of these chats, and yeah. So, thank you to all of my cursed commenters. Oh, no, you're not cursed. Just kidding. You're all my combo lords. I will not pass the curse on to you. Don't worry. If I get cursed, I promise I will never pass it on to my combo lords. Anyways, I'm probably going to wrap up our stream in a moment. This was a fun little one to just share some game details, share some random clips of things like floods and cats and such. And stay tuned for within the next few days, I'm going to try and have out my first episode that's on my combo class channel out of the 60 or so episodes I've put out so far. The first one that's an hour long. And it's probably going to be more. It's probably going to be like 70 minutes. So, this episode is about Magic the Gathering, another game, but whether or not you care about that game, the premise of the episode is more so what we can learn from this 30-year history of a popular game about game design by analyzing overpowered cards. So, whether or not you care about the game, I think you'll enjoy the episode. I'll have other bonus content coming soon as well. Thank you to everyone who has joined me in today's little stream. This one was pretty random, but we have a lot of great content coming soon. Like I said, I am back to putting out stuff. Put out a short a couple days ago, put out a Patreon thing, and I have some very intriguing options coming in my future. I still have a lot of problems. I'm still very anxious and depressed and bad at checking emails and stuff. However, there are some really, really good opportunities coming in the combo class future that could make us go to whole new levels. And I think we're about to. So, I'll see you all again soon on those ascending to new levels, one at a time. And I hope you all have a marvelous day until then. If anyone prints out these numberations and tests them, definitely let me know. I know I'm bad at getting back to some emails and comments, but I still love to see them. And I will reply to more of them as I have time and ability. So please still send me any thoughts about any testing you do if you decide to think about what would be good ratios of these numberations in a deck of this